So these easy doers and ponies that just look at grass to gain weight, we all know it's challenging to deal with them, and a lot of us have struggled to get weight off these ponies. But I just wanted to show you this really nice study by Alex Dugdale and some of her colleagues from Liverpool, where they restricted ponies to around 1% of their body weight in dry matter chaff per day and fed them on it. So that's a pretty restrictive diet, and if you actually measure what your ponies are being fed, I think you'll be struck really how much you are feeding them compared to what they actually need to lose weight. And I think this is where a lot of people go wrong, is they just don't appreciate how little these native types need to eat to stay the condition they are, and certainly don't appreciate how little they need to be fed if you want to get the weight off them. But in this study, they enforced this regime, which didn't cause the ponies any harm at all, and they did lots of measurements to make sure they were still in good metabolic health. And they were. So by restricting their diets, they did successfully manage to get the weight off them, losing around 2.5 kilos or 1% of their body weight per week, which is a good achievement. And importantly, alongside this, the graph on the right here shows you their insulin levels in the dark bars, that as the weight came down, their insulin levels came down. And as we've discussed, that's probably pretty central to why a lot of these animals are getting laminitis. So we can see that clearly this is having a beneficial effect, and we can extrapolate and suggest that it's reducing the risk of laminitis. So I'm not saying for a second that it's easy to get weight off these ponies, but it really can be done if we're diligent about it. So what would I suggest? Well, I think really we have to take complete control of their diet, and I know I would urge you to speak to your own vets about this specifically, because these guys are all individuals, there's different breeds, and it's harder to get weight off some breeds and some genetic lines than others. So please do seek specific advice, but just as general rules of thumb to give you an indication, they probably don't want much more than 1%, a lot of these breeds. 2% is probably pretty generous, and some may, under veterinary supervision, need even less than 1% of hay, and that's dry matter, that's really dry hay. And you want to soak it as well. That will reduce half of the soluble sugars that are in there, so it'll reduce the calorie content by about half. So soak it for 16 hours if you can, as long as possible really, and feed it fresh. Don't let it get mouldy again after you've soaked it. And in association with that, they need some kind of balancer to make sure they're getting adequate protein and vitamin and mineral levels, because none of us really, we probably should, but none of us do test the nutritional content of our hay. So they need something else just to make sure everything's okay in that regard. And you can need a degree in nutrition and a degree in mathematics to work out exactly what balancer to feed and exactly how much to do it. And it is very challenging for even those that do it all the time. So again, I would urge you to seek some veterinary advice, and there are feeds now that are available through veterinary surgeons that have it all worked out for you. According to how much hay you're going to feed, you know exactly how much proprietary feed you need to give to make sure your horse is getting what it needs. So again, speak to your vets about that. And this is controversial, I know, but really, if you're trying to get weight off these horses and ponies, at least in the short term, then we need to restrict access to grass. I know that sounds cruel, and I know there are disadvantages to it, but it is safe if we do it sensibly, and it is impossible to know exactly what calories a horse or pony is taking in if it is out at pasture. You've just got no way of controlling how much they're taking in. You're not going to analyse the pasture, and you're not going to know with the best will in the world exactly how much they're eating. And it is amazing how much the little monkeys can eat if they're pushed to. Most ponies will if they're pushed and if they're kept off grass for a period of time, they will manage to eat everything they need for the entire day in 3 hours on average grazing, and they learn to do this as well. There's been quite a nice study that enforced this routine where they were kept in and then turned out for 3 hours, and to start off with they ate maybe half of what they needed in the first 3 hours, and as soon as they got wise to the fact they were only getting 3 hours each day, within 6 weeks they knew how to eat everything they needed for the whole day within 3 hours. So it is frightening how much they can eat. So do, again, seek veterinary advice, but do think very carefully about how much access to grass they need. We don't want to keep horses in any more than you do, but sometimes it is a necessary evil. But while they're in for their gastrointestinal health, what we want to do is try and spread out their feeding as much as we can through the day. So double hay nets, triple hay nets, hanging the hay net in the centre of the stable so it acts like a punch bag, so when they're trying to get it out, it just keeps moving away from them to give them an extra challenge, so it takes longer for them to eat the hay. All these things to make their environment more interesting and just drag out the amount of time time that it takes them to meet their daily requirement. Because when you do actually weigh it out to be 1% of their body weight or their target body weight, you will, I suspect, be quite shocked how little it is compared to what you normally feed, which I think only goes to emphasise that most of us, unfortunately, feed far more than we should be. In addition to diet, and I know that's just a whistle stop, so please speak to your vets about more specific advice if you need it. Exercise really helps, and everyone always asks, well, how much do I need to exercise my horse or pony? Well, as much as possible, and then a bit more probably. There's no easy answer to that question. If they're laminitic and there's changes in the feet, naturally you can't do any exercise because that's going to make the laminitis worse. But if the laminitis is under control and your vet's happy, or you've got a horse or pony that is overweight and you're anxious to avoid laminitis, then exercise is key. Firstly, to burn the calories, and secondly, it does also alter the metabolism and increases the response of insulin. So it's a double whammy, really. It's good on both counts. There are drugs available, and it may come as a surprise to some that being a vet, I don't actually like using drugs for this condition. I don't really think they're necessary. I think we can manage without them, and where possible we really should. If we're doing everything we can to control their diet, I don't think either metformin or levothyroxine in the vast majority of cases are really necessary. But under veterinary supervision and in the right cases they may have a place, but they are definitely not something to be relied upon. They're the icing on the cake, they're certainly not the cake, and you really need to be thinking about diet, exercise, and then maybe other drug treatments, but I don't think they have a great place for the vast majority of cases.